Theodore Roosevelt, speech analysis, by me. Storming into the presidency comes Theodore Roosevelt, and with him a slew of ideals to combat the Great Depression. And though through that he will be successful, something horrible rests on the horizon for him, the American entrance to World War II. And he has some great speeches for those moments that I'm going to be reviewing in today's speech review. Also, you made a very large point out of identifying the logical fallacies in the speech when we were preparing for this, but it's not an important aspect of the actual presentation. Well, I'm making it an important part of the presentation. You'll see in a bit. Also, I have a weird focus on them because of that. I'm more concerned with the viewer experience than in-depth knowledge because I got slightly less time than everyone else, and that's made me kind of spiteful. No hard feelings. Speech 1, Inauguration. What was Roosevelt on about with that? Well, Roosevelt addressed the distress of the nation as it was deep in the pits of the Great Depression. His purpose was to get people and Congress to believe in his ideas and reforms that he planned to enact to fix the situation that the nation was currently under. It is at this time that I will now bring out the fallacy. Let's begin. I'm going to put that back. I'm going to bring that out each time I need it. I don't know why I did that. I don't know what's on the screen. Part 1. Grabbing attention and forming emotion. Through the first 2 paragraphs, Roosevelt establishes his authority and intent to speak of his plans to make the nation prosper through a broad statement that this great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive, and will prosper, following it with his assertion that fear is the main enemy and cause of the situation at hand. Tally for fallacy of the single cause and Ipsy Dixit. Single cause, Ipsy Dixit. Current tally. Don't fall. This is not very well planned out. He then moves on to state the situation at hand, the Great Depression and financial crises, only to pin the blame on not a lack of resources, but on money changers. Through this, he acquired 3 counts of appeal to emotion, fear and spite mostly, 1 count of the finest fallacy, at least 2 counts of ad hominem, I'll just count it as exactly 2, and at least 4 counts of appeal to authority. Mainly, he attacks money changers, a term biased in definition, for only ever relying on tricking people with credit as a main generator of spite, while spicing up his speech with impactful and complex linguistics. Here's the tally. And it's doing that weird thing again. Call to action. Roosevelt goes on to claim that his happiness that happiness in general is sourced from traditional means of achievement, creative effort, while furthering his stance against creditors. Drops a major call to action, and then starts outlining his planned policies, directing work through the federal government forming large projects, reduction of the land mortgage and lending crisis through relief and foreclosure, and policies for controlling banking and speculation. Throughout, he continues to throw calls for action and powerful phrasing in clear attempt to rile the crowd and generate agreement. He also accrued 1 moralistic fallacy. I actually wrote an L there. Well, 1 count assertion, proof by assertion, rather, 2 package deals, 3 Ipsy Dixits. So as I should explain, Ipsy Dixit is when you proclaim something and then you either just hold it to be evidently true or just explicitly say that it's true because I say it's true, but it's not the one that's where you actually say it's true, like explicitly. It's hard to explain. 4 counts of appeal to emotion, 4 appeals to authority. He really uses his stance of authority quite a lot. He then shifts attention to Congress's dealings in an attempt to coerce them through both himself and the people. I just love how slides messing up right now. Roosevelt finishes his speech by placing further responsibility on Congress to allow him to enforce his policies through any means, before closing out on a positive assertion that the U.S. will prosper and finishing on a random call to God. He does not threaten Congress, makes it clear that he has no intent to back down from his proposed policies. 1 count false dilemma, 4 counts appeal to emotion, 2 counts appeal to authority, and 1 count thought-terminating cliche. I realized I forgot to show it after the previous. Here's the tally. He's racking up those points. Those aren't good points. So, okay, did it work? It sure did. Roosevelt enacted a good majority of what he wanted to enact. Nothing directly happened from the speech, as it wasn't an inauguration, but he ultimately got many points of the New Deal successfully enacted, pulling the U.S. out of the Great Depression to some degree. The argument was weak without any citation whatsoever, but was said with enough force and passion to drive many and ultimately succeed. Finally, I figured it's considered seminal due to 1, being sourced from a famous president, and 2, forming the starting point of the USA's exit from the Great Depression. I figured both of those are pretty major points to the piece. So, now we move on to Speech 2, Declaration of War. I don't know if this is showing up on the recording, but every time I move forward a slide, it keeps flickering back to the previous. What's going on? The Japanese Navy, at the time of the speech, has just attacked Pearl Harbor. Roosevelt was addressing the nation, his purpose being to inform them of the nature of the attack and to state a formal declaration of war. This speech has less argumentativity and length to it than the previous, so this part will be less run content. Part 1. Introduction and Establishment of Relations. Roosevelt starts with a bold and direct statement that Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor. He then continues with an explanation of the presumed peace between the U.S. and Japan, citing the diplomatic exchange happening at the time, and making a claim that the attack had been planned for quite some time. That's the first informational part. This part of the speech means to direct hostility toward Japan, arguably rightfully, while establishing the context of the situation through the vivid description of the presumed peace. There were 2 counts. Appeal to emotion. I'll show you it after the second part, because there's only 2 parts of this part. Part 2. The Situation and Action. Roosevelt continues further with a broad statement of reported American deaths before revealing the larger part of the Japanese attack across the Pacific, closing out with an assurance that we will overcome the Japanese and that we are at war with the Japanese. This part meant to further brew outrage, only to direct it at the Japanese with the closing statement of war, while avoiding fear by assuring American persistence and ability. This part racked up 5 accounts. Appeal to emotion. 3 counts. Appeal to authority. Feels like I'm reading out a recipe here. 1 count, Ipsum Dixie. I want to put Dixie, it's Dixit. Whatever. And 1 count, proof by assertion. Oh, I forgot to put this right there. Along with 1 count begging the question. So, here's the tally. Don't know how well you can read it. I'll back up just to make sure. Put the microphone in front. Alright. So, what was the result? For one, it functioned quite well as a declaration of war, the speech, that is, as it was a declaration that contained a message that we were at war. It also could be said to have worked in its other intended purpose of enraging and engaging the populace, since the U.S. ultimately achieved victory against the Japanese and the European theater, but that's not important, that's not the speech. The speech was cemented in a much stronger argument than the previous, as the Japanese had, in fact, been deceiving the U.S. and had, in fact, bombed Pearl Harbor. Finally, this speech is seminal because it marked the U.S.'s entrance into World War II. Simple as. I mean, you can't get that much more seminal than that. Alright, I'm now going to read the slide. It says I'm going to go check the recording, see how much time I have left. And if I have plenty of time, I'm going to go and start citing more in depth.